As most of us know, Squad 7.2 just dropped the other week, in which came a list of bug fixes longer than the list of laws broken by your local politician, the new squad map voting feature and sub-factions, a couple of new vehicles, and map adjustments. But more importantly, a handful of changes to Squad's controversial infantry combat overhaul mechanics. Weapon bobbing had been reduced, G3s, FALs, SKSs and Mosins had their sway completely reworked, and bolt action rifles now have manual bolting and a recoil reduction so you can see what you're shooting at. And it's these changes that I want to focus on in this video, and then talk about a few other things that need to be addressed and some other potentials for what's next. But as for what we've just got, this update is exactly what Squad needed. Having played Squad since 2017, I've been there for most of Squad's journey and changes, but nothing turned the game on its head quite like the Infantry Combat Overhaul. Back in late September 2023, Squad went to 6.0 with the Infantry Combat Overhaul going live, and a week later was a very small update making some even smaller tweaks to some of the mechanics. But since then it has remained completely unchanged. The whole purpose of it was to make people work together more, prolong firefights, cut back on lone wolfing, and generally make the game more cinematic and immersive. It wasn't to make it more realistic, despite them saying so. Right from playtest 1, I was very vocal about a lot of the overhauled mechanics, saying they were far too extreme and overwhelming for the casual player, and before you scoff, most of Squad player base is casual, especially when you see the gaming background most people come from. Not everyone is a comp player who wants to min-max and micromanage every game, and not everyone is an FPS god with reflexes like Shroud, and not everyone has been playing since the Project Reality days. In fact, dare I argue, 80% of Squad's player base doesn't even know what a Project Reality is. During the playtests, little to no changes were made to the weapon handling, and with most of the dialing in seemed to be around the suppression mechanics and getting all of the picture-in-picture optics to work and being usable. Now when it was all pushed live into 6.0, a good chunk of the player base walked away from Squad. Most still haven't returned, but at the same time, Squad has probably had its biggest influx of new players ever. So much so that the actual player base grew and is still slowly growing to this day, which is fantastic for a small game like Squad. However, as the honeymoon period of the ICO has drawn to a close, I've seen more and more people getting more and more frustrated with the weapon handling and other various mechanics associated with this. Even new players were complaining about it, saying how much they loved the game, but the simple weapon mechanics just left them overwhelmed and incredibly frustrated. Even though I myself was getting frustrated, some factions played fantastically, whilst others I would actively avoid. I just did not enjoy anything about how they played anymore. And this is where the 7.2 changes have come in, because it's obvious that OWI have been listening, watching and taking notes on what we've all been saying, and rather than just smash it with a nerf bat like most developers would do, or revert all the changes like some people were campaigning for, they've started to do what I predicted, and they are fine-tuning it all. The changes to weapon bobbing, iron sights and the battle rifle class overhaul, whilst very marginal, have had a huge impact already, simply because these small changes have pushed things into a much more enjoyable state. It hasn't taken anything away from the overhaul, it's simply enhancing it. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, we play games to have fun, and I know there's a handful of people who enjoyed it when it was incredibly difficult and random, including a few content creators who were lobbying to have it made more extreme, but for a game to survive and continue to be successful, it needs to be enjoyable for the majority, not the minority. And it's funny to see that some of these people from the minority have flip-flopped. They're doing everything they can to please everyone, as difficult as that is. OWI has been very hands-on with getting everything they needed for these changes. A lot of you who watch my streams will have noticed various devs in my squads over the past few months whilst playing the game with everyone, and that's been great to see. The changes to the battle rifles mixed in with the changes made to the clear sight mechanics have made weapons such as the FN FAL and Mosin become not just usable, but fun to use now. The one thing I'm really noticing now is the wide variety of optics, hollows and irons being used amongst the players. They're all starting to get their own place now, and the trade-offs are really starting to click into the foundations, especially now that the weapon bobbing has been reduced across the board and the clear sight mechanic has been changed to come in when you're about under 40% stamina. It's making things like moving whilst aiming down sights not only more viable, but usable, all whilst rewarding the player who actively manages and looks after their stamina. And adding the fact that they've stated that they aren't finished when it comes to tuning things leaves me hoping they will tune and fix a few other mechanics that are either unfinished or just got forgotten about. Now, when it comes to forgotten and swept under the rug mechanics, the biggest one for me is probably the absolutely drunk as high hell pistol handling. You know, it's wild when you can handle a battle rifle with no stamina better than a 9mm pistol with almost full stamina. Half the time, I wish I could just throw them at people. At least then I could see where it's going. SMGs could also do with some love too, especially the little scorpion that the Insurgent gets. Whilst it handles alright, the ADS time feels like I'm trying to ADS a weapon made from dark matter. I dare say I could ADS an RPG faster. And the biggest elephant in the room, no, not that one, this one, fall damage. In-game, this is probably the one thing that people constantly complain about the most. I always thought it was too punishing pre-6.0, but wow, this is another level. Hopping off a wall that's only 5 feet tall and you lose 90% of your health is a bit overkill, especially when you're a tank crewman and you have taken some health damage from the vehicle burning, so you hop out to repair and die. I understand part of this was to combat some of the exploiting you could do by throwing yourself off of the roof of a building and then catching yourself on a wall by vaulting over, all whilst taking no damage. But the fact you can no longer vault after jumping or falling, that exploit is already dead and buried. So it would make sense to reduce some of the fall damage from smaller heights. It would, however, be cool to have a leg-breaking sound to accompany it though. It would certainly send a few shivers down people's spines when they do fall off a roof or a cliff. These new ICO adjustments, whilst very minor, are a huge step in the right direction, and have been very welcomed by the community. If you're one of the players who walked away due to the frustrations of the Infantry Combat Overhaul brought, now is the time to give it a try for a few days. Whilst it may not be in the ballpark you'd like it to be, it's certainly getting much closer to that middle ground the vast majority of the player base was hoping for. Personally myself, it feels like it's about 90% there now. It's just individual rifles and classes that's going to need some tweaking and adjusting. For example, all bullpup weapons behave and handle particularly poorly when compared to conventional rifles. They seem to sway a lot faster and just generally be more unpredictable. Then there's that weird situation where suppression hangs on for upwards of 30 seconds after you've been shot at. I think the longest my screen has been blurred out for is about 3 minutes. And let's be honest, whilst the suppression mechanic is fantastic and it's doing its job, not being able to look at my screen and see anything for 2 to 3 minutes is a complete joke. And if you think that's a good feature, then you're either a private optician and hoping to see a boost in customers from this, or you just need to give your head a bit of a wobble. The way the blur comes in and out when being mortared is absolutely perfect as a good example. Mortar lands, boom, you're suppressed to fuck. Less than 2 seconds later, you can see again so you can actually move and get to cover. That's what it needs to be when you're getting shot at. Comes in harsh and goes away just as quick. Not blinded for 30 seconds upwards. That's just dumb. Keep in mind that suppression also affects your weapon sway and misalignment. I think being able to see so you can move is going to be a fair trade-off whilst you can't really handle your weapon. So it's not like someone's just going to wiggle peek and knock down their MG who's constantly spraying at you for the last 10 minutes. Anti-tank launchers feel like they're in a bit of a better place right now as well. The sway for sidestepping a few paces is still a little strong, but 20m min-arm for heavy and 15 for light is a fair trade-off. Honestly, the infantry side of things is heading in a really good direction. A lot of players are still too afraid to move, but it's becoming more user-friendly and starting to move away from the RNG to skill-based again, but with the whole premise and ethos of the combat overhaul that it tried to achieve. However, let's be realistic. If OWI really wanted players to work closer together and as a bigger, more cohesive unit, it would make more sense to give us a better tutorial for new players, along with some simple in-game tips, similar to what Hell Let Loose does. But more importantly, an overhaul to the game modes would be the next realistic way to get people to change their ways. What's your thoughts on some of these changes made recently? Or what changes would you like to see to the game modes? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and if you made it this far, link to my socials and everything is in the description down below. Take care, I'll catch you on my next video, or on my server, Dead on Dismount. Good night.